The deepest wounds we carry are not inflicted by strangers or enemies, but by those we trusted most. The business partner who steals from you, the spouse who breaks their vows, the friend who spreads your secrets, the mentor who uses your loyalty for their gain. These betrayals cut deeper than any physical injury because they shatter something more precious than flesh. They destroy our faith in human goodness, our ability to trust, and our belief that virtue matters in a world that seems to reward deception. Yet in the annals of human suffering, perhaps no group faced more systematic betrayal and devastating disappointment than the Stoic philosophers of ancient Rome. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, watched his most trusted advisors plot against him and his own son rebel against everything he stood for. Seneca, who dedicated his life to moral teaching, was ultimately forced to commit suicide by the very student he had tried to guide toward virtue. Epictetus, who taught that inner freedom was unconquerable, spent years in physical chains, betrayed by the very civilization that claimed to value justice. These men didn't just survive betrayal, they used it to forge a philosophy so robust, so practical, so psychologically sophisticated that it has guided human beings through 2 millennia of heartbreak, deception, and shattered dreams. They discovered something that modern psychology is only beginning to understand: betrayal and disappointment, handled with wisdom, can become the raw material for building unshakable character and deeper compassion. If you've ever felt the sick emptiness that comes with discovering someone you trusted has been lying to you, if you've ever experienced the rage that follows realizing your loyalty was being exploited, if you've ever questioned whether goodness and honesty have any place in a world that seems to punish virtue while rewarding vice, then what you're about to learn could change not just how you handle future betrayals, but how you recover from the ones that have already wounded you. The 13 rules I'm about to share aren't theory crafted in academic isolation. They're battlefield medicine for the soul, developed by people who faced betrayal so severe it could have destroyed them utterly. Instead, they used these experiences to develop insights that have helped countless individuals not just survive treachery, but emerge from it stronger, wiser, and more capable of genuine connection than they were before. But before we explore these rules, we must understand something that most people get completely wrong about betrayal and disappointment. We think of these experiences as purely negative, as evidence that the world is cruel and people are fundamentally selfish. We treat them as interruptions to our happiness, obstacles to our goals, proof that we were foolish to trust or hope in the first place. The Stoics understood something radically different. They saw betrayal and disappointment not as evidence of a malevolent universe, but as inevitable aspects of human existence that could either destroy us or refine us, depending on how we chose to engage with them. They recognized that the pain of these experiences was real and valid, but they refused to let that pain determine their philosophy of life or their capacity for future connection. This isn't about becoming cynical or emotionally armored. It's about developing what Marcus Aurelius called sympatheia, a deep understanding of human nature that includes both its capacity for goodness and its propensity for selfishness, both its potential for loyalty and its weakness for betrayal. When you understand people accurately rather than idealistically, betrayal becomes less shocking and therefore less devastating. Consider the last time you felt deeply betrayed or disappointed. What story did you tell yourself about what this meant? Did you conclude that people can't be trusted? That your judgment is fundamentally flawed? That the world is hostile to those who try to do right? That virtue is naive in a world that rewards cunning? These conclusions, while understandable, rob you of the very experiences that could strengthen your character and deepen your wisdom. When we become cynical after betrayal, we protect ourselves from future pain, but we also cut ourselves off from future connection, growth, and the possibility of experiencing genuine trust with people who actually deserve it. The Stoic approach is more subtle and ultimately more powerful. Instead of hardening your heart against all future vulnerability, you learn to distinguish between wisdom and naivety, between appropriate trust and blind faith, between healthy skepticism and paranoid suspicion. You develop what we might call intelligent openness, the ability to remain open to connection while being realistic about human nature. The first rule that governs this approach might surprise you because it challenges everything our culture teaches about forgiveness, justice, and how we should respond to those who wrong us. Most people think that when someone betrays you, you have two choices: forgive them and risk being hurt again, or refuse to forgive them and carry the burden of resentment forever. The Stoics discovered a third option, one that protects your inner peace without requiring you to pretend that betrayal didn't happen or that the betrayer deserves continued trust. This approach recognizes that forgiveness and trust are separate decisions, that you can release your anger without releasing your wisdom, that you can wish someone well while refusing to give them additional opportunities to harm you. But the most revolutionary aspect of the Stoic approach to betrayal isn't how it deals with the betrayer, it's how it deals with you. Because while you cannot control whether others will lie, cheat, steal, or abandon you, you can control how these experiences shape your character, your relationships, and your future choices. The person you become in response to betrayal and disappointment will determine everything about your future, your capacity for joy, your ability to connect authentically with others, your resilience in the face of future challenges, your contribution to making the world more trustworthy rather than less so. Are you ready to discover how the greatest philosophers in history transformed their worst experiences of betrayal into their most profound sources of wisdom? The first rule of dealing with betrayal begins with a truth so fundamental that accepting it changes everything. Expect nothing from others beyond what their character and circumstances make probable. This isn't cynicism, it's accuracy. When we expect people to behave better than their demonstrated patterns suggest they will, we set ourselves up for disappointment. When we expect them to prioritize our interests over their own without clear mutual benefit, we create the conditions for feeling betrayed. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They're like this because they can't tell good from evil." This wasn't pessimism but preparation. By adjusting his expectations to match human reality rather than human potential, he protected himself from the shock and devastation that comes with repeated disappointment. This doesn't mean expecting the worst from everyone or assuming malicious intent where none exists. It means observing people's actual patterns of behavior rather than their stated intentions, noticing how they treat others when they think no one important is watching, and adjusting your level of vulnerability accordingly. It means understanding that most people will act in their own perceived self-interest most of the time, and planning accordingly. The second rule addresses what might be the most psychologically damaging aspect of betrayal: the tendency to take it personally. When someone betrays us, our natural response is to assume their behavior reflects something about our worth, our judgment, or our naivety. We tell ourselves that if we were smarter, more valuable, or more discerning, this wouldn't have happened to us. But the Stoics understood that betrayal reveals far more about the betrayer than about the betrayed. When someone lies to you, they're demonstrating their relationship with truth, not your gullibility. When someone exploits your trust, they're revealing their character, not your foolishness. When someone abandons you in difficult times, they're showing you who they are, not what you deserve. Epictetus, who experienced the ultimate betrayal of being sold into slavery by his own civilization, taught that no one can hurt you without your permission. This doesn't mean that betrayal doesn't cause real pain, it absolutely does. It means that the long-term damage to your self-worth, your ability to trust, and your faith in goodness is something you control through your interpretation of what betrayal means. The third rule requires perhaps the most difficult psychological work, distinguishing between the natural pain of betrayal and the unnecessary suffering we add through our interpretations and reactions. Pain is inevitable when someone we trust violates that trust. Suffering, the story we tell ourselves about what this pain means, is optional. When betrayal occurs, we experience immediate emotional pain. This is natural, healthy, and temporary. But then we often begin a process of mental elaboration that transforms temporary pain into long-term suffering. We replay the betrayal obsessively, imagining different outcomes, plotting revenge, or catastrophizing about future relationships. We turn a single event into an ongoing psychological torture. The Stoic practice involves acknowledging the natural pain while refusing to feed it with unnecessary mental activity. This person betrayed my trust, and that hurts, is pain. This person betrayed my trust, which proves that I'm a terrible judge of character and will never be able to trust anyone again, is suffering. The first statement describes reality. The second adds interpretation that serves no constructive purpose. The fourth rule addresses one of the most common mistakes people make after experiencing betrayal: the attempt to change or punish the betrayer. Whether through confrontation, manipulation, or seeking revenge, we often exhaust ourselves trying to make people who have wronged us acknowledge their behavior, feel remorse, or face consequences. Seneca understood that this approach gives the betrayer continued power over your emotional state and wastes energy that could be better invested in protecting yourself and moving forward. The best revenge, he wrote, is not to be like your enemy. The most powerful response to betrayal isn't retaliation. It's living so well that the betrayer's actions become irrelevant to your peace and progress. This doesn't mean avoiding appropriate legal action when crimes have been committed or failing to set necessary boundaries to protect yourself. It means refusing to make your emotional well-being dependent on whether the betrayer faces consequences or acknowledges wrongdoing. It means focusing your energy on your own recovery and growth rather than on controlling outcomes you cannot guarantee. The fifth rule might be the most counterintuitive. Use betrayal as information about what you truly value. When someone betrays us, we often focus exclusively on what we've lost: money, time, trust, security. But betrayal also reveals what matters most to us, clarifies our values, and shows us where we may have been living according to others' expectations rather than our own authentic priorities. If a business partner's betrayal devastates you primarily because of financial loss, it reveals that your sense of security was too dependent on external circumstances. If a friend's betrayal wounds you most because others witnessed it, it shows that your self-worth may be overly tied to social perception. If a romantic partner's infidelity destroys you mainly because it challenges your identity as someone who is loved, it indicates where your sense of value needs to become more internally grounded. These revelations aren't comfortable, but they're invaluable. They show you exactly where your psychological vulnerabilities lie and what work you need to do to become more resilient. They highlight the difference between what you thought you valued and what you actually value when tested. They provide a roadmap for building a more authentic, internally grounded sense of worth. The sixth rule addresses perhaps the most difficult aspect of processing betrayal: maintaining your own integrity while dealing with someone who has abandoned theirs. When someone treats you dishonorably, the temptation is to respond in kind, to lie to liars, to cheat those who have cheated you, to abandon your principles because others have abandoned theirs. Marcus Aurelius faced this challenge daily as emperor. Surrounded by people who would smile to his face while plotting behind his back, he could have easily justified becoming manipulative, paranoid, or ruthless. Instead, He used their treachery as inspiration to become more committed to virtue, not less. The best way to avenge yourself, he wrote, is to not be like the one who injured you. This principle protects you from the corrosive effects of betrayal on your own character. When you maintain your integrity despite others' lack of integrity, you prevent their poor choices from contaminating your values. You ensure that their betrayal doesn't succeed in making you less than who you want to be. You demonstrate that your character is independent of their character. The seventh rule focuses on one of betrayal's most insidious long-term effects: the tendency to close yourself off from future connections out of fear of being hurt again. This self-protective instinct is natural but ultimately self-defeating. When we wall ourselves off from vulnerability, we also wall ourselves off from the deep connections that make life meaningful. The Stoic approach involves what we might call intelligent vulnerability, remaining open to connection while being wiser about how, when, and with whom you share your trust. This requires developing better discernment about people's character, clearer boundaries about what information and resources you share, and more realistic timelines for developing deep trust. Epictetus taught that we should trust people gradually and in proportion to their demonstrated trustworthiness. You don't have to choose between naive openness and cynical closure. You can learn to trust people with small things before trusting them with large things, to observe how they handle minor responsibilities before giving them major ones, to see how they treat others before assuming they'll treat you differently. The eighth rule addresses something that often prolongs the pain of betrayal: the fantasy that the relationship was something other than what it actually was. When someone betrays us, we often mourn not just the loss of the relationship, but the loss of our illusions about what the relationship meant to the other person. But relationships are defined by actions, not intentions, by patterns, not promises, by consistency, not moments of apparent connection. If someone was capable of betraying you, the relationship was never what you thought it was. This isn't a failure of your perception, it's information about reality that you didn't have access to before. Accepting this truth is painful but liberating. It means you're not actually losing something as valuable as you thought you were losing. It means the betrayer never truly appreciated what they had, which says nothing about your worth and everything about their judgment. It means you can grieve the relationship you thought you had while recognizing that it existed primarily in your imagination. The ninth rule might be the most practically important: use betrayal as a teacher about human nature, including your own. Every betrayal contains lessons about warning signs you might have missed, boundaries you should have maintained, and assumptions you made that turned out to be incorrect. Instead of avoiding these lessons out of shame or anger, mine them for the wisdom they contain. What patterns of behavior did you ignore because you wanted to believe the best about this person? What red flags did you rationalize away? What early signs of selfishness, dishonesty, or manipulation did you excuse? What boundaries would have protected you if you had maintained them clearly? These questions aren't about self-blame, they're about self-education. The goal isn't to conclude that you were foolish, but to become wiser. The goal isn't to become suspicious of everyone, but to become more skilled at distinguishing between people who deserve different levels of trust. The 10th rule addresses one of the most psychologically complex aspects of betrayal: the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. Most people confuse these two concepts, thinking that forgiving someone means you must trust them again or allow them back into your life with the same level of access they had before. The Stoics understood that forgiveness is an internal process for your own peace of mind, while reconciliation is an external choice that should be based on evidence of genuine change. Seneca wrote extensively about forgiveness, not because he was naturally forgiving, but because he discovered that holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Forgiveness, in the Stoic sense, isn't about pretending the betrayal didn't happen or that it didn't hurt. It's about releasing the emotional charge that keeps you psychologically connected to the betrayer and the betrayal. This internal release doesn't require any action from the person who wronged you. They don't need to apologize, acknowledge their behavior, or demonstrate remorse. Forgiveness is something you do for yourself, to free yourself from the burden of carrying anger that serves no constructive purpose. It's a decision to stop allowing their past actions to continue hurting you in the present. But forgiveness doesn't automatically lead to reconciliation. Trust, once broken, must be rebuilt through consistent actions over time. Someone can be forgiven for betraying you while still being considered unsuitable for future trust. You can release your anger while maintaining your boundaries. You can wish someone well while refusing to give them additional opportunities to harm you. The 11th rule focuses on something that often gets overlooked in discussions of betrayal: your responsibility to the other people in your life who haven't betrayed you. When we become consumed with processing betrayal, we often neglect the relationships that are working, the people who have remained loyal, the connections that deserve our attention and care. Marcus Aurelius understood that dwelling excessively on betrayal could blind him to the goodness that still existed in his life. While he processed his pain and learned from his experiences, he also made conscious efforts to appreciate and nurture the relationships that were serving him well. He refused to let one person's betrayal poison his view of all people. This practice serves multiple purposes. It prevents you from becoming isolated in your pain. It reminds you that not everyone is capable of betrayal. It helps you maintain perspective about human nature. Yes, some people will hurt you, but others will support you. It ensures that the betrayer doesn't succeed in destroying your capacity for connection with people who actually deserve it. The 12th rule addresses what might be the most important long-term consequence of how you handle betrayal: the kind of person you become as a result of the experience. Every betrayal is a test of character, an opportunity to demonstrate what you're made of when tested by difficulty. The person you choose to be in response to betrayal will influence every future relationship and every future challenge. You can become bitter, suspicious, and closed off, viewing betrayal as evidence that the world is fundamentally hostile and that trust is always a mistake. Or you can become wiser, more discerning, and more appreciative of genuine loyalty when you encounter it. You can use betrayal to justify becoming less trustworthy yourself, or you can use it to recommit to being the kind of person who honors their commitments even when others don't. Epictetus taught that we cannot control what others do to us, but we have complete control over who we become in response to what they do. The betrayer's actions are finished. They happened in the past and cannot be changed. But your response to those actions is happening now and will continue to shape your future for years to come. The choice is stark. Will you allow someone else's poor character to diminish your character, or will you use their betrayal as motivation to become even more committed to virtue? Will their lack of integrity inspire you to abandon your integrity, or will it inspire you to value your integrity more highly? Will their betrayal make you less trustworthy, or will it make you more appreciative of trustworthiness as a rare and valuable quality? The 13th and final rule synthesizes everything we've discussed into a comprehensive approach to not just surviving betrayal, but using it as raw material for building antifragile character. Character that becomes stronger when stressed rather than weaker. This involves understanding betrayal as an inevitable part of any life lived fully, courageously, and vulnerably. If you never experience betrayal, it might mean you've never trusted anyone enough to be betrayed. If you never face disappointment, it might mean you've never hoped for anything significant enough to be disappointed. If you never encounter deception, it might mean you've never been valuable enough for anyone to think it worth deceiving you. This perspective doesn't minimize the pain of these experiences or suggest that you should seek them out. It simply recognizes that a life without any betrayal or disappointment would be a life so small, so cautious, so disconnected that it would hardly be worth living. The goal isn't to avoid these experiences entirely, it's to handle them so skillfully that they strengthen rather than break you. When you approach betrayal with this mindset, something remarkable happens. Instead of seeing yourself as a victim of someone else's poor choices, you begin to see yourself as a student in the school of human nature. Instead of viewing betrayal as evidence that you're naive or unlucky, you begin to view it as evidence that you've been brave enough to trust, bold enough to hope, and valuable enough to be worth betraying. This doesn't make betrayal pleasant or welcome. It simply makes it meaningful. It transforms an experience that could embitter you into an experience that can enlighten you. It takes something that happened to you and turns it into something that serves your growth and development. The integration of these 13 rules creates what we might call antifragile trust, the ability to remain open to connection while being realistic about human nature, to trust appropriately without being naive, to forgive without being foolish, and to learn from betrayal without being broken by it. As we bring these 13 rules together into a unified approach to handling betrayal and disappointment, we must address the most challenging question of all. How do you maintain hope in human goodness while being realistic about human weakness? How do you continue believing that virtue matters in a world that often seems to reward vice? How do you keep your heart open when experience has taught you that openness can lead to pain? The Stoics discovered that the answer lies not in choosing between optimism and realism, but in developing what we might call tragic optimism, the ability to acknowledge the full spectrum of human nature while still choosing to align yourself with its highest possibilities. This means expecting both nobility and selfishness from people, preparing for both loyalty and betrayal, and remaining committed to virtue even when virtue seems naive. Marcus Aurelius exemplified this approach throughout his reign. He dealt constantly with people who would smile to his face while plotting against him, yet he continued to treat people with dignity and respect. He experienced repeated betrayals from those closest to him, yet he never abandoned his commitment to justice and compassion. He faced disappointments that would have broken lesser men, yet he continued to hope for the best while preparing for the worst. This wasn't ignorance or denial, it was philosophical sophistication. He understood that the existence of betrayal doesn't negate the existence of loyalty, that the presence of deception doesn't eliminate the possibility of honesty, that experiencing disappointment doesn't require abandoning all hope. He chose to focus on controlling his own character rather than trying to control others' character. When we integrate the 13 rules into daily practice, we discover something that might surprise us. Handling betrayal skillfully actually enhances our capacity for authentic connection rather than diminishing it. When you're no longer afraid of being betrayed because you know you can handle it, you can be more selective about who you trust while being more genuine with those you choose to trust. When you understand that forgiveness is an internal process for your own peace rather than an external absolution for the betrayer, you can release resentment without compromising your boundaries. When you recognize that disappointment often reveals unrealistic expectations rather than actual tragedy, you can adjust your expectations while maintaining your standards. This transformation from victim to philosopher is perhaps the most powerful outcome of applying Stoic principles to betrayal. Instead of being someone who suffers when others behave poorly, you become someone who grows stronger regardless of how others behave. Instead of being dependent on others' integrity for your peace of mind, you develop the kind of inner strength that remains stable whether others prove trustworthy or treacherous. But let's be completely honest about something. Mastering these rules isn't easy, and it's not quick. The natural human response to betrayal is emotional, immediate, and often destructive. Learning to pause, reflect, and respond according to philosophical principles rather than emotional impulses requires tremendous discipline and practice. There will be times when you forget these rules entirely, when you react to betrayal with pure emotion, when you allow disappointment to make you bitter or cynical. The Stoics anticipated this. They weren't superhuman. They were human beings learning to become more skilled at being human. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively in his private journal about his struggles with anger, his difficulties with forgiveness, his ongoing battle to maintain virtue in the face of others' vice. The key is to treat each betrayal as a training opportunity. When you handle it well, when you maintain your dignity, extract wisdom from the experience, and grow stronger rather than more bitter, you build your capacity to handle future betrayals even more skillfully. When you handle it poorly, when you react with destructive anger, close yourself off from future connection, or compromise your own integrity, you learn what doesn't work and adjust your approach. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. The goal isn't to become invulnerable to pain, it's to become skilled at working with pain constructively. The goal isn't to eliminate betrayal from your life, it's to ensure that when betrayal occurs, it serves your development rather than your destruction. Perhaps the most profound realization that comes from mastering these principles is this: the people who betray you are often doing you a favor, though they don't intend to. They're revealing their true character before you invest even more deeply in the relationship. They're showing you where your judgment needs refinement. They're providing you with opportunities to practice virtues you might never develop otherwise. This doesn't mean being grateful for betrayal or seeking it out. It means recognizing that since betrayal is going to happen, because you're going to live boldly enough and trust deeply enough to sometimes be disappointed, you might as well extract maximum value from these inevitable experiences. The Stoics understood that we cannot control whether others will honor their commitments, tell us the truth, or treat us with the respect we've earned. But we can control whether we honor our commitments, tell the truth, and treat others with respect regardless of how they treat us. We can control whether betrayal makes us more suspicious or more discerning, more bitter or more wise, more closed or more selective. When you master these 13 rules, you discover something that changes everything. Your happiness, your peace of mind, and your sense of worth become independent of others' behavior. You can experience the full range of human emotions in response to betrayal without being controlled by those emotions. You can feel hurt without being damaged, angry without being destructive, disappointed without being devastated. This independence isn't isolation, it's liberation. When you're not afraid of being betrayed, you can take the kinds of risks that make life meaningful. When you know you can handle disappointment, you can hope for outcomes without being attached to them. When you understand that your character is separate from others' character, you can maintain your integrity regardless of the circumstances you encounter. The modern world will continue to provide abundant opportunities to practice these principles.